Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Let's see, we have an item here, top of page 2, communication reports. We have the Water Pollution Control Facility monthly operating report summary for the month of October 2024.
All right, so
The green, you don't have a color sheet, but
it's basically the first, I'll pull it up on here so you can see it too, but the first, yep, that sheet right there.
so your question about the rain, that's that first. That's that first item on that list.
So when you see the flow in million gallons a day, that's how much water we treat here per day. So to put it in perspective, this plant's designed at 6.3, so we're under half of that right now. Just because there's been no rains, or flow is typically lower without it. If we do get flow, it's infiltration. You get water in the manholes when it rained. You get stuff from runoff. We've done up to 20 million gallons a day here, so it's a lot of water. We averaged 2.6 million gallons for October. BOD is biochemical oxygen demand, and when I say TSS, it's suspended solids. So all that is when you look in water, if you see like finely dissolved particles, that's basically TSS. BOD is essentially food in the water. So we have microorganisms here, and when you guys walk out, there's actually like a bug chart on the wall of all the microbiology we have. So those organisms will consume the food in the wastewater that comes in, or the BOD.
So the bugs actually help to clean the water.
Correct. Effluent ammonia was 0.21. Oh, and then for the efficiencies, BOD, we had 98% removal, and suspended solids, 99.1% removal.
Explain that item, Mark.
Yeah, so we have by permit, this is all basically permits from the DEP and the EPA. They basically say, hey, you guys have to remove this amount for your permit. It's 85% is what is standard for us, but we typically, I'd say, average 97 to 99%. So it's almost 98% efficiency removal for both on average, which is pretty good.
So essentially, solids that go down the toilet and into the pipes and then follow all the way to the plant. Well, when they're in the plant, they create an environment that these microbiology, the bugs, actually consume the solids. So you're taking something that's very dirty and you're cleaning it up where, I don't say it's almost drinkable, but
Yeah, we're one step away from being drinkable, because whenever I do tours, if it's for, UHART or Miss Porter's, everybody always asks me, can you drink the water? Right. And I'm like, I mean, I wouldn't drink it without one more step, but if you've ever swam or fished in the river, this water is cleaner than the river. So the water we're putting into the Farmington River is cleaner than the Farmington River itself. So it's pretty clean. And all of these are representative of basically what we have to do for the permit. And essentially what we do is, if you think of like a waterfall in a stream and it's aerated and it's treating the water, we're basically doing that naturally within 20 hours of the sewage coming in here. So it leaves cleaner than the river within 18 to 20 hours. So ammonia obviously comes into the plant. We convert that to nitrite, gets converted to nitrate, and then we send it to an anoxic zone, which is no air with food, and then it's converted to nitrogen gas and goes into the atmosphere. So basically all the harmful particles we're removing or changing forms. So we brought in 1,005 pounds of nitrogen. This is average, and we removed basically 900 pounds of that. So we only had 109 pounds left, which was 68 pounds under our permit. So we're also removing almost 90% of the nitrogen daily through the facility. Phosphorus is the same. Our permit's 70 pounds. We're basically almost half of that, 42 pounds. Biosolids is basically all the solids that come into the facility. We basically put them in a big, it almost looks like a press where they're squeezed. So we remove all the water out, and we add polymer to coagulate it. And then you basically send it to Hartford and they burn it. Some states, you can use it as fertilizer, like think of like Commodore, right? Other states they use for like composting, but basically right now a lot of it is burned in this area. So that's the only byproduct we have. All the water goes right out to the river. E. coli was 3.78. Anything under 5 is pretty much non-detect. So if you were to go take a sample of the river or, water in the stream, I can almost guarantee the E. coli would not be non-detect. So what we're basically coming out on our outfall is very clean. Any questions on that or anything I can answer? All right.
Okay. And if this goes over your head, I mean, don't be surprised, because it's very technical and there's a very high level of chemistry and biology. With okay,
That's for the project update report. So we kind of explained here.
so let's point them to the right direction.
I'm gonna tell them like how everything gets here kind of for
Okay.
you kind of stuff. So you're gonna be on the next sheet, starting right here. Well, actually in the bold ones. So all the water here or wastewater from your house, depending where you are, like if you're down by the mall or you're in like a hilly part of town, it has to get here. And if it can't get here by gravity, you have to pump it, right? So we have 17 pump stations throughout the town and almost 180 miles of sewer. So our sewer basically is farther than from here to Albany. So what we have to do is basically get all the sewage to the plant because it can't just sit in the line or in your basement because then nobody would be happy, right? So if it's down by West Farms, which is a low point, we pump it 250 feet uphill to numerous pump stations to get it here. So there's all like many basically wet wells and pumps that bring it here. So when you see some of these names like the Yukon Pump Station or Tungus Village or Snowberry, these are all stations that are around town. Obviously, West Farms is West Farms, Yukon is Yukon. But some of these are pretty large stations. So the Yukon Pump Station does a million gallons a day of pumping pretty much every day. So it's almost like 30-40% of our flow.
Let me just interrupt a bit.
Yep, go ahead.
So most of our sewer runs by gravity, so basically we connect at a high point, and then as it flows in a gradient that's lower, it flows by gravity. And where we cannot flow by gravity, we have to install the various size pump stations. So in other words, you'd still have the water run to a low point, but you'd actually have a setup where you'd have pumps that pump it back uphill, so you can find another way to drain it down by gravity. So
To a low point.
yeah, to a point, yeah.
Yeah. So everything here is like, as we were saying, is just pumping, right? Because if you're not pumping it, it's backing up into homes or businesses. You don't want to call Yukon or West Farms and tell them you have to close it because it doesn't always go over well. And a lot of the people that kind of aren't aware of this field, they don't realize the infrastructure that is involved in this. So we had an upgrade at this facility six years ago now, actually going on 7. We just finished, and just the upgrade was almost $60 million. So if you were to add in our pump stations, all the lines out there coming to the facility, I mean, you're in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It's probably 2 or 3 times as much as the high school, to put in perspective. So a lot of people don't realize the amount of infrastructure that's actually out there, that's doing the work for everything. So October 2nd, we installed a pump at the Yukon pump station. This was one that we had rebuilt. We have the last one on order to replace the original KSB pump, which is 24 years old. And again, I always get the question on tours, well, what if one pump fails? Well, there's another one that's running. What if that one fails? You have a third pump. What if the third pump fails? And I always tell everybody, it's like, it can't, right? So we can't ever be down on Christmas Eve. This plant's running full time. On Thanksgiving, this plant's running full time. And I have guys on call basically 24/7, 365. Even during COVID, we had split shifts. We were here. So the plant is 24/7. Tungus Village pump station. We stripped and put a new roof on. It was over 30 years old and it was replaced. We're working on Harlan Road as well. That one was recently completed. I'll scroll down for some pictures after. Snowberry Pump Station, we pulled pump one. We found a large ball of rags. After removing it, we installed it and ran it without incident. When we say rags, it's basically like anything people put down the toilet that they shouldn't, right? I mean, we found pairs of jeans in the pump stations. Don't know how they get in there, but anything you could think of, we found. So it's not good for equipment. It damages it. Flowing into this facility where the sewers might be 36 inches in diameter, we found cinder blocks, 2x4s, pieces of wood, trees. So don't know how it gets in there, but it does. And obviously, when you have a pump that's $250,000, you don't want that stuff flowing into it.
So this section of the meeting, we're just going over the maintenance that was done in the prior month. So this is more technical to.
Yeah, and anything that
operation.
we do for preventative maintenance or maybe a call out we got at a station, any of that will come up here. We jetted Garden Street, Pearl Street, Maiden Lane, Maple Street, and Meadow. So jetting is basically when you have your sewer lines, there's also a program we run called FOG, which is fats, oil, and grease. The best way I can describe this is if you have somebody that eats like cheeseburgers their whole life, like what happens to their arteries, right? They get coated and they get clogged. So in the sewer, if you don't have a FOG program, if you go to Naples Pizza or another place in town and there's a lot of grease and they just literally throw it down into the pipe and it goes in the sewer, those sewer lines that might be, 12 inches or 8, they start shrinking, right? Because the grease accumulates. So we're in charge of cleaning all lines too, because if the line gets clogged and your house is connected to it, all of a sudden, then you're gonna have a backup in your house. So on top of the plant and the 17 stations, we have 180 miles of lines that we try to keep clean. So we typically try to jet, which is high pressure. It's a truck, it has a high pressure hose that goes through it at 2,500, 3,000 PSI and just basically scours the pipes. So basically we try to do about 50 miles a year. So every 3 years we finish the town, then we just start all over again. So we jetted these streets in October. We assisted highway in cleaning, vacuuming some of the storm drains, which is for rainwater. We had a call from the Unionville Museum about a possible backup. It ended up not being any of our lines. It was roots in their lateral. Another thing we commonly find is a homeowner or a business will call us and they're all freaked out because everything's backing up into the home and they think it's the sewer, but the homeowner will own the lateral, which is the pipe that goes from your house to the main line, the sewer. And if you have a big maple tree in your front yard, the roots will literally grow down and eventually find their way into the pipe. So then the roots clog the pipe. So you have to get cutters and clear those out, but that's typically not our responsibility. So the museum is fine now, but they had to get a plumber and cut everything. We installed a new whippet on the Vacon. The Vacon is our truck. So with 100 feet of hose in the new end, we have about 600 feet. Typical manholes are 300 feet apart. Some of the ones in town can be up to 800. So we put more hose on to be able to reach them. And we continue to inspect right-of-ways. A right-of-way is basically an area where our sewer flows through. It might be woods, might be through like an easement in somebody's backyard. So we need to keep those clean. If we can't get in with the truck because there's trees there, or you see crews like trimming around power lines sometimes, they have to keep it clean because if there's an emergency and they can't get the truck in because there's an oak tree in the way. So we constantly have to maintain those too.
Excuse me, Mark, when you jet the pipes for the FOG program.
Yep.
Do you collect and do you send it to the MDC or what do you do with it?
So typically we don't find a lot of grease because we have the grease program, but if we find grit or anything in the pipes, we jet it out and then we have a gigantic vacuum that's basically sucking up the next manhole. So we're pulling that out. That comes back to the plant. It goes to our basically Vacon pad where we basically just have a pile of grit. And then once we accumulate enough, then it goes to MDC. So, or it goes to New Jersey, depending if it's inert or not.
I watched them do it on Garden Street last month.
Yeah, they were out there for, I think, a couple of days. They should have been,
For
yeah.
days, the big red truck going back and forth.
That's it.
Yeah,
But-
when they did that on Garden Street, Mark, how do they seal those manhole covers back up? Because they're all very loud now when you drive
So
over
it's
them.
good you told me, because I was actually gonna ask. So we basically, sometimes they're not loud, and then other times, if they've been in there for, let's say this is year like 3 where we haven't been out there for a while.
Mhm.
And we have like a little graphite seal that goes around, so it'll basically prevent it from wobbling.
Right,
Some of them don't need to, but some of the ones that are on there, you gotta hammer out, then that happens. So we can come and put a little bit along the edge and it'll quiet it up. So-
Have you been hearing them, Phil?
Not in front of my house, but
Okay.
Yeah.
They are.
Is it right in front of your insurance or
No,
farther down?
No, further down towards the cemetery more.
Yeah, we'll
Heading, south?
Headed south, yeah,
It's coming here, I went to Garden Street, I didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll take a look
Well,
tomorrow.
did you drive over any manhole covers?
Well, no, I.
He's gonna hit everyone on the way home now.
Appropriate plane, so.
Yeah. But yeah, we can put a little ring, it's a graphite seal on it that helps. So repairs at the plant.
One more question, Mark.
Yep.
Where's the fountain that you put on the rail?
So the rails to trails by the highway garage.
Yeah.
Where it goes up the hill, they're
Yeah.
putting in one right there, so we basically just sucked out a little dirt, cause sometimes it's easier to dig with the truck. Than to just get the backhoe there, cause they only needed like a 12-inch hole, so we just
Yeah.
sucked out a couple feet and then they were good to go.
And did you guys help with the one at Norwell School?
When
When they
not
relocated
recently,
that?
no, but we did that in the past.
Well, they relocated it. finally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Repairs at the plant.
Excuse me, while
Oh,
I'm thinking of it, whatever happened to the repairs to the? There was erosion over near the cemetery
back
there.
at the cemetery.
Oh, it's still.
It's still eroded.
It's
Still
still,
eroded?
we're waiting for Russ and the,
That's gonna be a big job,
yeah, that's.
massive.
It's probably 25 feet from the sewer line now.
Yeah. Cause we did have the
Or it's-
one
Yeah.
a couple years ago, we fixed on the canal over here, but that wasn't as bad as where the
That
cemetery
was
is.
correct, that was,
Yeah.
yeah, oh no, that was not as bad as.
Cemetery is a big
as the
area.
one that's going to be happening, yes.
Repairs at the plant. Operators and maintenance installed a new breather on the primary #1 gearbox. Basically, these are just all pumps and equipment we have here that we use to treat everything. October 10th, we installed a new reactor on the RAS pump 4. This is an electrical portion. We had replaced the original one, which had failed a couple months ago. And then anything here too, it's like when we say it was replaced and it had failed months ago, it doesn't mean that we just let it be failed for 6 months. A lot of these parts we have duplicates on, but some of them, if we order a new pump and it's coming out of Germany or Hungary, some of them are 8 to 12 month lead times. So you always have to have backups. October 18th, we had a new UPS battery was installed in the maintenance garage. We proactively replaced these before they fail. WPCF maintenance installed new gas strips for the fuel tank. They were just getting worn out. It's one of our older vehicles. We began cleaning out the pack tanks. Pack is polyaluminum chloride. So our two biggest things for treatment here are nitrogen and phosphorus. So nitrogen you remove basically in the aeration tanks. That's you take your ammonia, you convert to nitrate, and then nitrogen gas. Phosphorus is a little more tricky. You can do it chemically, you can do it biologically. We do a little bit of both. PAC is basically it's a coagulant. So the phosphorus particles stick to it. It's like almost like a glue. And then when we waste everything, the phosphorus goes into the waste and then it gets burned at MDC.
So you've heard the term NDC a couple of times.
Mattabasset District.
In Hartford, there's a very large facility that has some extra capabilities, including that's. Can they burn from there, Mark?
They burn there, so it's a hot topic politically. I'm sure I don't know if you guys heard of PFAS in any of your classes before, like polyfluorine alkalines. It's I don't want to get on a huge tangent, but you guys will get bored probably. But they're in drinking water, they're in basically every organism on Earth now. We have them in sludge because it goes through our bodies. So the only way you can get rid of them is basically incineration with high temperatures, but you have certain states that don't want incineration because of emissions. So you land apply sludge. If you do that, you can use it as fertilizer, but then it grows in the grass, the cows eat the grass, you drink the cow's milk, and then you have PFAS.
So it's like
Yeah, it's difficult. So
They call it the forever chemical.
it's an 8-chain carbon, so it never goes away. Not in our lifetimes. So it's a very politically charged issue because people want clean air, so they don't want emissions. But then if you land apply it, there's other issues if you're not burning. So right now in our field, it's a pretty intense topic. But so we burn in Connecticut still. They also do send trash out of state to landfills. So it really depends on where you are in the country, but every state's basically having similar problems with it. Let's see. October 24th, we just greased the odor control units and inspected them. We just use activated carbon, which helps the air flow through it, so it reduces any smells if there are. October 31st, we ran the last day for the UV system. So that's for disinfection. So we literally run them from April 1st to October 31st, and that basically disinfects the water going in the river.
So as a clarification there, up until the plant was rehabbed, they actually used chlorine,
Yep.
which, has got its own health or safety issues here. So that was one of the things that we converted from a chlorine-based disinfecting into a ultraviolet light.
And then when I give tours to people always ask me, they're like, oh, they look like tanning bulbs. And I'm like, they're the same. So tanning is bad. So basically we use them to sterilize all the microorganisms. So it's not a good thing, right? But they do work well.
One of the very last processes.
That is the last process. So if you were in Asia now, a lot of places, they will literally take the water and it's returned to drinking water. So if you had like a reverse osmosis system, maybe one more system after this, it would borderline be drinkable. So, and it's common in other parts of the world now.
So we discharge everything into the Farmington River.
Yep.
And is there any samples or do we do any testing at all in the river itself?
We do aquatic and chronic tox, which like tests for fish. But again, like our samples are much cleaner than the river. Not that the river's dirty, because it's not. It's just our water is very clean going out. So
is the light light that you use instead of chlorine better?
it
Is that
is.
what
I
it
mean,
is?
so chlorine is as much as you want to reduce chemicals, you want to reduce chemicals, right?
Yeah.
So when we added chlorine, then you can't, because it was a last process, you can't just then put the chlorine residual into the river because then the fish gonna hit with the chlorine and they're gonna die. So then we added sodium bisulfate, which is a chemical that gets rid of it basically neutralizes the chlorine. So then we'd have to add sodium bisulfite. And all of these things are also money. So the least chemicals you can add, the better. There's certain parts of the process that you need to use them for, but if we use any now, I mean, for food, like let's say the food coming into the plant drops down, you could literally use sugar water. You could use dog food and the bugs will consume it. I don't know if you've heard of like E85 or ethanol at the pump, right? For gas, they'll consume that too. It's corn. So there's other things you can try, but the UVs are definitely, I'm not gonna say easier to operate, they're better to operate because there's no chemicals involved.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We're under the nitrogen permit by 68 pounds with a total of 109. That was for the month of October. And we just had OSHA training on bloodborne pathogens, et cetera, and also welding and blazing. And that's it for the month of October. Any other questions? This is the roof we put on at Tunxus. Couldn't really get any stupendous pictures of it, but that's it. It looks a lot better than it did before. So
Who did that, Mark?
us,
You guys did that?
yep.
That's the same guy that did the block work,
Different guys, but
yeah.
yeah, we kind of alternate because again, like we have guys in the plant, we have guys in the truck jetting, we have guys on pump stations, so it's always something different.
Maybe you could go around out there, but as far as the personnel that actually runs this place,
Yep.
how many of each type of guy and what do they do?
So we have full staff, we have 13, that includes a secretary. To run these facilities, you need engineers, you need maintenance, you need electricians, you need operators. So we have 8 operators, we have 2 full-time maintenance guys, an electrician, and then myself, and then my assistant manager. So right now we have about 12 guys full-time. Some might be more, they might be second shifts or third shifts. I mean, if you're in New York City, you might have a plant that has 300 employees. But again, whereas we might be doing 3, 4, 5 million gallons a day, they're doing 2 billion.
So it kind of just depends on the area you're living
The
in.
size, yep. Obviously, New York's gonna have more, there's more people, or Boston, right, is huge too, so they have large plants there. But every large city or town will have one of these, unless they're very remote. So. Any other questions?
Okay, then under the engineer report, we've got the listing of property with sewer permits.
If there's only a couple.
Developer.
Yeah.
Yeah, the new development like Harding Way, and it was just sewer connections paid. So those were the only ones we had.
So, and again, you may or may not be interested, but how do you explain the finances of what this whole operation is about?
Yeah, so basically, if you build a new home, you'll have a one-time connection fee, and then every year, you at one point, or your parents at this point now, basically pay a user fee. So they'll pay if it's $360 or $380 per year. So we collect all those fees. Commercial ones are on a different scale. We collect those as well. And then it basically that dictates how much we have to spend, right? If we have to increase the budget or go down, it depends on outside factors too. Like this year, obviously gas went up, so diesel went up. So our hauling costs for the solids went up. The electric went up as well. So our costs just to run the facility went up. So then sometimes we may have to go out and say, hey, we're looking at maybe getting an increase in the user fees. But that's pretty much what dictates our budget and how much we can play with. So we collect it from commercial and residential.
Has the budgeting review started yet, or when did that?
Not yet. It's literally going to start next month, December. So,
Mark, talk about Burlington and Avon.
oh, good point. Yep. So this is a regional facility. So we take flows from Avon, Canton, Plainville, and Burlington. So there's 4 towns that come in here. So they pay us basically, not to get in the whole billing cycle, but they pay us as a percentage of our flow. So we have flow meters in the various towns. Some are paid by EDU, which is basically per house, they might say you use 70 gallons of water a day. So we'll bill them if there's 3 people in the house, I'm 210 gallons. Avon and some of the bigger ones, we have flow meters. So we take all the flow they send us, which might be 500,000 or 2 million gallons a day. We divide in our total flow and we bill them as a percentage. So we're also collecting those fees from the 4 surrounding communities. So.
Is Avon paid you?
No. Not yet, but that question did come up, so.
Jackson.
And again, I don't know whether we talked about it early on, but the flow that we saw. At the different levels here. Pipes are connected to each other, and sometimes the water level in the groundwater level is high. So what ends up happening is the water from the rain and all of that actually is forced into the pipes, and then the pipes doesn't, they would transport the water to the plant. So
We don't like that.
we don't like that. So we're constantly trying to improve the amount of leaking pipes that we have, because it saves us water treatment.
Yeah, because then you're treating rainwater instead of sewer, right?
Oh.
So we're getting indirectly, we're paying to treat clean water. And you had asked about the pressure in your house for drinking water. If you're on the water distribution side, which is different than sewer, but you might have a leak in a pipe that would cause a pressure drop, right? So they will constantly chase a pressure drop in a line because they're trying to find why it's happening. Here, we're trying to constantly find, if it's dry out, why am I getting so much flow from this area? Because it's not raining. I know my sewer is typically, 200,000 gallons a day from Yukon. Why am I getting 500,000? So, and then you go out on a right of way and you might have a sewer line and there's all the cattails around it. So you know it's a wet area. And then when it rains, the water's just coming in from the manholes. So you'll try to raise them above grade or you epoxy it. So you basically seal it and it's watertight. But it's like chasing for a long time. And you can spend a lot of money doing it. So you kind of have to fiscally look at what's proactive and what's too much, So
So the current sewer charge market is what?
360,
365.
360, yeah, a
365 per
house,
year.
yeah.
per house.
Which is very cheap compared to other communities. We actually just did a study the other year. So we're almost half of what other communities are with a facility this size, which is very impressive.
And we just had a $35-40 increase.
Yeah.
This past July.
Yep.
Due to the factors that Mark had mentioned as far as the cost of gas and diesel for transportation and also the electricity to run these pumps.
Yeah.
Take a lot of electricity, very intensive.
Yeah, so there's certain days here. Our electrical bill per day might be $2,500 just to run pumps and blowers. Blowers are just oxygen for the bugs. But if we ever get questions from the public on it, my thing is always that, well, if you go to the grocery store now, it's not cheaper than it was. Or if you're getting gas, it's more expensive. So we have the same issues here, just on a much higher scale. So we could save, and we did save a lot of money in chemicals and overtime. But when our O&M costs went up $400,000 or $500,000, we just can't save that much. So it's kind of outside of our control, unfortunately.
And Mark mentioned earlier about the cost of any chemicals, so those prices keep going up.
Yep.
Also, and so we try to cut back as much as we can to save the money to avoid using chemicals, but that's.
And I just looked today, not to interrupt you actually, because I was doing a survey for EPA. So our polymer cost used to be, when I started, it was $1,800 a tote. I'm paying $4,600 right now. And that's over, not when I started, when I took over, so that would have been 5 years, but it's over double, which is crazy.
Just for one chemical.
Yeah. So
Okay, I'm moving on with item G, any new business?
should be good.
Any unfinished business? And public correspondence? Hearing none, any other business? And you ladies get an opportunity to ask something to do with your assignment here. If we can help you, we'll try to give you any kind of.
Okay,
Anything come to mind?
I mean, if you could just give us like background on like information we can use about water pollution, like if we're trying to write, like if we're trying to teach others, I guess.
One thing that I would say that would probably impress somebody that doesn't know about it, and I had a professor tell me this, was the two things that basically changed history or health in first world countries was, number one was healthcare and medicine. And you want to guess what number two was? Water treatment.
Sanitation.
Sanitation and water treatment. So if you think of like all the old diseases, like cholera was carried by wastewater, the bubonic plague was like waste and rats and stuff. But those were the two biggest things that basically changed societies. So it's not well known, and people drive by here and don't even know we exist. But when you put in that kind of perspective, it's huge. I mean, if we were shut down for a day, not even a day, if we were shut down for an hour at the Yukon pump station, I mean, they would be backing up within 45 minutes.
So that the hospital couldn't operate.
Yeah.
Without, a way to run the sewer.
And the same with the West Farms Mall. I mean, we just know that we have an hour and a half before it backs up, so we have to constantly be running. And most people just don't know that, and it's perfectly fine. It's just people don't know if they're not in the field. So it is pretty important, that and medicine.
So essentially, back in time, Mark mentioned the diseases and things, people didn't understand, they didn't have, obviously, the knowledge and stuff that's been generated over the years, but by just having open running, some backward countries have, still to this day, they don't treat the sewage or they don't pipe it out, so it's running down the sides of the streets and things like that and causes health issues.
And
Yeah,
contaminates it.
Yeah, I'm learning about that in history too, like how they didn't have like systems of disposing waste.
Yep.
So they would dump it on the streets and then that would go to the rivers and then cause a bunch of diseases.
Did you ever hear the ghost map
No.
about London? If I don't know if you're into reading, that would be a good book for you to read. I had to read it in college. It's basically about the cholera epidemic in London in the 17 or 1800s, and they discussed how they literally used to just
Throw the bucket out the window.
Right.
literally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's-
yeah.
And so some smart guy back then could not figure out why certain rich people, but then poor people on higher elevation farms weren't getting sick from cholera. And the people on the farms that were poor at higher elevations weren't getting sick because the water runs downhill. So they never got the waste and any of the diseases. The rich people drank so much alcohol that it was killing a lot of the diseases, so they didn't get it.
You can skip that part.
And the people, this is true, but and the people that got the most sick were by the Thames River, and when the tide would back up, they were at the low points, so all the sewage would come and basically go in their water supply, and they got sick. And that was the start of wastewater treatment. That's how it started. So that book was actually interesting, not even in a nerdy type way, so. But
Any follow-up?
No.
Okay, how about you?
Gotta look at the poster on the way out
Yeah,
though.
that's
yeah, a lot of people
Oh,
do
yeah.
like the poster, and we have water bears in the plant, which everyone for some reason is obsessed with because they found them in space, I guess, or something. So we have water bears now. And anyways,
All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? No,